All eyes were glued to the screen when Stephen Colbert nearly derailed his own show, The Late Show, on May 26, 2025, plunging into an explosive confrontation no one saw coming. What was meant to be a friendly interview about Chuck Norris's career and charity work spiraled into chaos as Colbert, known for his sharp rhetoric, pushed Norris to the edge by targeting his deeply held beliefs about Pope Leo XIV. In a stunning display of overconfidence, Colbert tried to paint Norris as a reactionary, only to face a backlash that left the studio in stunned silence. Insiders reveal a tense atmosphere behind the scenes and a power play that nearly upended the broadcast. If you thought you knew Stephen Colbert, think again. Follow the updates on X under hashtag Colbert vs. Norris, as this story peels back the curtain on one of 2025's most prominent hosts. Colbert kicked off the interview lightly. Quips about Norris's old action films, his invincible tough guy persona, and the memes still circulating online. Norris smiled, sharing a story about accidentally smashing a wooden wall on the set of Missing in Action, and the audience roared with laughter. But beneath the humor, Norris noticed Colbert's piercing stares, as if waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The mood shifted when Stephen, holding a note card, casually tossed out, "Chuck, you're not just an actor but a man with strong convictions. There's been a lot of talk about the new Pope, Leo XIV. His reforms are, shall we say, stirring debate, especially among conservative circles like yours. What's your take on his direction?" A hint of irony laced Colbert's voice, and the room fell quiet, sensing the conversation veering into dangerous territory. Norris gripped the armrests of his chair, his fingers twitching slightly. He knew Pope Leo XIV, elected just a year ago, was a lightning rod for change in the Catholic Church. His calls for radical openness and rethinking traditional doctrines had sparked heated debates. For Norris, whose deep faith anchored his life, this question was a red flag. He exhaled, striving for calm. "Stephen, I respect the Pope as the Church's leader, but I don't agree with how some of his ideas dilute what many of us see as the foundation of faith. Faith isn't about chasing trends or pleasing the crowd. It's about principles that have stood the test of centuries." The audience clapped, but the applause carried more tension than support. Colbert leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, his smile sharpening. "Interesting, Chuck. But Leo XIV talks about love and unity, doesn't he? His push for inclusivity, dialogue with other religions, that's an attempt to make the church more accessible. Or do you think he's, say, too progressive for folks like you?" The word progressive landed like a veiled jab, and the audience burst into laughter. Norris felt heat rising to his face, but his voice stayed steady. "I'm not about labels, Stephen. Faith should be solid as a rock, not pliable like clay. Leo XIV wants change, but some of it feels like a departure from what makes the church the church." Colbert didn't back down, his tone growing more provocative. "Oh, Chuck, surely you don't deny the Pope's trying to modernize the church? Or do you think he's betraying tradition? I've heard you're not thrilled with his statements on, say, climate or social justice." The room hushed, the air thickening with tension. Norris realized this wasn't just a question. It was a trap to paint him as a backward relic before millions. His heart pounded, but he locked eyes with Colbert. "Stephen, if you want to talk about the Pope, let's be honest. I heard you at private dinners calling Leo XIV an idealist leading the church into chaos. You said his reforms were a show for liberals. So why don't we talk about your words?" The studio froze. The audience gasped. The spotlight seemed to burn brighter, and Colbert, always in control, momentarily lost his composure. His smile faded. His eyes flashed with surprise and anger. "Chuck, that's a pretty serious accusation," he said, trying to keep his tone light, but his voice wavered. "Where'd you get that information? Care to share your source?" The audience laughed, but it was nervous, strained. Norris didn't flinch. "I don't play games, Stephen. I heard it from people I trust, and I'm not one to throw words around lightly. You want to dig into my beliefs? Fine, but be ready to answer for yours." The crowd erupted in applause, more shocked than joyful. Technicians backstage exchanged glances. The producer in Colbert's earpiece whispered frantically. Stephen tried to defuse the situation. Chuck, this is a show about entertainment, not a courtroom. Let's lighten things up. Tell us, how do you stay in shape at 85? But Norris felt everything inside him boiling. Years of having his faith mocked, twisted, or used for ratings coalesced into this moment. He leaned forward, his voice quieter but firmer. Stephen, I'm tired of people like you taking faith or principles and turning them into a punchline. You want the truth? I'll give it to you. You've laughed at Leo the 14th behind closed doors, called him weak, said he's selling out the church for popularity. And you think you can sit here, challenge me, and not answer for it? The room exploded. Some clapped, others jeered. Colbert, visibly rattled, tried to push back. Chuck, I respect your stance, but this isn't the place for those kinds of accusations. Let's not turn this into a circus. But Norris was done. Adrenaline surged, anger and frustration spilling over. He stood, yanked off his mic, and tossed it onto the table. I came here to talk, not to be your target. If you want a show, you've got it. He turned and walked off stage, leaving Colbert stunned and the audience in chaos. Backstage, silence greeted him. Technicians averted their eyes. A producer tried to speak, but Norris raised a hand, signaling the conversation was over. When Norris stormed off, leaving his mic on the table, the CBS studio fell into a stunned hush, broken only by scattered gasps from the audience. His parting words, "If you want a show, you've got it," hung heavy in the air. Stephen Colbert, momentarily frozen, quickly regained his composure, adjusting his tie and flashing a forced smile at the camera. Well, folks, looks like Chuck Norris decided our show was a bit too hot for him, he quipped, drawing nervous laughter from the crowd. Leaning forward, his eyes glinting with a mix of defiance and unease, he pressed on. You know, I respect Chuck's passion, but maybe he's more comfortable kicking down doors in movies than tackling tough questions about faith or politics. Guess he ran out of steam for a real debate. The audience laughed again, but the sound was uneasy, tinged with discomfort. Sensing the need to reclaim control, Colbert doubled down. Honestly, I've heard Chuck's been busier peddling his miracle vitamins and workout gear than engaging in serious discussions. Maybe he should have popped one of those courage pills before coming on. The crowd roared, but the laughter carried a cruel edge, as if they sensed Colbert wasn't just joking but striking below the belt. Raising an eyebrow for the camera, he added, "And those claims about me bad-mouthing Pope Leo the 14th? Come on, let's get real. I'm a Catholic, I respect the Pope, and I've never said anything like that. Maybe Chuck mistook me for one of the villains in his old action flicks, where he takes down bad guys without evidence." The laughter rolled through the room, but backstage, producers exchanged worried glances. Colbert continued, "I invited Chuck to talk about his career, his life, but it seems he decided to play missing in action right here on our stage. Maybe he'll come back when he's got better stories than gossip about me." The audience chuckled, but the tension lingered. Colbert's attempt to spin the moment into humor felt like a deliberate jab to diminish Norris. He threw in one last dig. Maybe Chuck's just mad I didn't ask about his latest meme. You know, something like, Chuck Norris can walk off a stage, but the stage can't walk away from Chuck. The crowd laughed, but it was forced, and even Colbert seemed to sense he'd gone too far. He swiftly called for a commercial break, his smile strained, eyes betraying unease. Backstage, a producer whispered into his earpiece, "Stephen, that was too much. We can't leave it like this." But when the show resumed, Colbert pivoted to the next guest, acting as if nothing had happened. Yet the room, and millions watching at home, knew they'd witnessed something raw, a crack in the polished veneer of show business. Norris, now in his hotel room, the air heavy with the scent of chlorine from the pool below and hotel shampoo, watched the replay on his laptop. His friend and manager, Ted, sat nearby, scrolling through a flood of X-posts about the scandal. As Colbert's barbs played out, calling Norris a fugitive and vitamin peddler, dismissing his accusations about the Pope as fiction, Norris's face darkened. "He's lying," he said quietly, his voice steady but laced with steel. "He thinks he can humiliate me on national TV and walk away clean." Ted sighed, rubbing his temples. "Chuck, it's showbiz. He's saving face for ratings. What's the plan? Ignore it or hit back?" Norris rubbed his beard, gazing at Manhattan's lights through the window. "I'm not letting him have the last word," he said, his tone resolute. The next morning, as headlines like "Chuck Norris storms off Colbert's show" and "Live TV meltdown" dominated X, Norris agreed to a brief interview with a conservative cable channel that reached out overnight. The setting was a cozy cafe near his hotel, filled with the aroma of fresh croissants and strong coffee. Outside, New York hummed. Taxis honked, pedestrians rushed. The journalist, an older woman with a warm face and a slight southern drawl, set a microphone before him. "Mr. Norris, after last night's Colbert show, the country's buzzing about your walkout. What happened?" Norris looked into the camera, his eyes sharp but his voice calm, carrying a weary confidence. "Stephen Colbert invited me on, but instead of an honest talk, he played dirty. He tried to mock my faith, my principles, and when I called him out on his comments about Pope Leo XIV, he panicked. Then, after I left, he lied, called me a fugitive, and ridiculed my work. He thought he could humiliate me in front of millions and get away with it." The journalist nodded, her eyes alight with interest. "You mean his remarks about the Pope?" "He denied saying anything like that." Norris smiled, but it was cold. "Stephen can deny it all he wants, but I know what I heard. He called Pope Leo XIV weak, said his reforms were a show for liberals. When I brought it up, he had no answer. Instead, he lied about me, mocked my career, my faith. That's not courage, it's cowardice. If Stephen wants a real conversation, I'm here. But I doubt he's up for it." She smiled, sensing a soundbite. "What do you say to your fans who saw the show?" Norris paused, his gaze softening. "Stand for what you believe in, even if they try to tear you down. The truth always finds a way." The interview wrapped, and Norris leaned back, the tension easing. He finished his coffee, left a generous tip, and stepped into the morning air, thick with asphalt and possibility. X was already ablaze with his words, some cheering, others accusing him of overreacting. But deep down, Norris felt a quiet resolve. He'd spoken his truth. What came next? Headlines, an apology from Colbert, or a bigger storm, was uncertain. Yet as he walked through New York's bustling streets, he sensed this moment was a turning point, a spark that could either fade or ignite something new.